John, we got a lot to discuss today about the approaching election and Dominion voting systems. Somebody just put a pretty important message into the stream, but I don't want to be redirected by social engineers. We've got a plan for the show today. How are you?
I'm doing great. We've got some material that I don't know that anybody really has seen. When we get to the patron-only portion of the show, you'll tell people how to get there in a second. But when we get to the patron-only portion of the show, you guys are going to get to see a Dominion software presentation that was recorded inside a conference room. All right, so this is going to be, you want to be a fly on the wall and find out how does Dominion pitch their software and its capabilities. I was the fly. And I got that video. And we're going to watch it. And you're going to get to see how Dominion's Democracy Suite, how does it work? What does it do? What are its features? What are its capabilities? And so that's what we're going to do when we get to the patron-only portion of the show. Jason and I are going to present the Dominion software to you. All right, so Jason and I have spent, our careers working with software. Jason with Photoshop and Adobe and Premiere and a whole bunch of different professional software tools in the video production world. And I've done, mapping and banking systems, all kinds of crazy stuff using Oracle and HP stuff. So between the two of us, we've got a lot of experience with pretty heavy duty software. And so what we're going to be taking a look at is the Dominion software and its features and capabilities, because if and who's using it, right? So we're going to look at who's using Dominion, who's not using Dominion, and we're going to, who owns Dominion. A lot of chatter about that. People say the Chinese own Dominion. So we're going to be busting a lot of the misinformation and, just really clearing up a lot of stuff. And I think it'll be interesting for people. It's a little bit of a different, type of thing that we have, typically cover. And, but I thought it was important.
Yeah. John, we're live on your X account. So that's good. The broadcast is rolling there. People can watch live if they're following you at I_am_John Cullen. People can also watch live on X at JG_CSTT. Everybody knows, John, you and I are doing these Friday shows with the sponsor exclusive segment. That's coming up right after this at 8 o'clock. People can join us on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and subscribestar.com, and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We had a really good X Spaces last night, John, with Ian, Cancel, Co, talking about the Tim Waltz sexual harassment allegations, and then also this whole dust up with Mindy. I found, I don't want to get too distracted with this, but I did find our initial conversation back in maybe, I guess, April or March of 2022. I had forgotten this whole component about that guy, Patrick, whatever. This guy had written an article. It was the simultaneity of these weird things happening where this guy had sort of pre-blocked us, released this article all about Mindy making a documentary about your information. I mean, I think any thinking person realizes this does not make sense. This is not the way that actual journalists would release a story. It's plausible that somebody might see Mindy's documentary, but the fact that the guy knew that you and I had something to do with this, the blocking of us, knowing that they were going to release this story wide and that you and I were likely to be upset about it, that's not the way a legitimate journalist would do it. If somebody found Mindy's documentary and that led them to you, they'd call you and say, hey, what is all this about helicopters and blah, blah, blah. Pretty interesting, isn't it?
Well, two things. A number of people have commented in the last day or two that they've been blocked by Mindy.
Oh.
they're like, but I never even heard of the girl until, 10 minutes ago when you guys brought her name up and I went over to check out her stuff and I'm blocked by her. And
Hmm.
it reminded me of that Chris Boozy bot sentinel
Right.
thing, this tool that has the ability to say that if these people follow John Cullen, block
Right.
them from
Block
me.
them. Yeah.
Block them from me. And it's like, and so you end up with, 100,000 people just got blocked. And so people were kind of stunned, like, why am I blocked from India? I never even heard of her. And I went to look at her and I'm already blocked. Never even heard of the girl. So that is number one. Number two is sort of a number of people sort of commented and said, you know, imagine if Mindy had, went to you and said, hey,
Right.
I'm doing a 2.5 hour documentary and I'm really kind of motivated, by
Interview
your
you.
stuff. Can I use your stuff? Can we kind of break it down? Can we take the best pieces, kind of like what Ian was talking about
Exactly.
on the
Answer
spaces last night?
questions for me and help me clarify
Right.
my understanding rather than
Well, Ian
taking
was
it
talking
and
about,
alienate. Right.
he was talking about doing a documentary.
Right.
And imagine if that was the approach that Mindy took. And if she had approached me and said, hey, again, I want to do this, and if we took highlights and I had some time and I could interview you, she sits down with some guy that's got 160 subscribers, Rafiki. It's like, huh? It's like
Doesn't make
him?
any
Who
sense.
is, who is, yeah. So people are kind of waking up to it. And I think more and more, I guess, we've been fortunate to be in front of a number of stories now. And the fact that all of this, alternative media people keep ignoring these findings is starting to become suspicious to people. People are becoming very suspicious of Dan Bongino
Right.
because Eli Crane and Corey Mills brought this up with Chip Roy,
And he's
right? Chip
avoiding it right in front of everybody.
and now it's in the testimony. And
Right.
people were like pinging him on Twitter
He's
and
still
nothing.
ignoring it.
And so people are kind of looking askance at these guys, all of them now, and saying, how is this not like relevant?
Yeah.
Particularly given what we talked about last week, the fact that we had this testimony. But I don't want to get too far off of this voting
Oh,
system
but just
thing,
one
'cause
more
it's
quick important thing, though, because
sure,
Ken
yeah.
Silva had turned up this new information that the
You did a
Pittsburgh
show with Ken.
Motorcycle Unit.
You did a show with him yesterday, right, on your
Yeah.
channel?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
he's got some new info here. He's got, various right to know lawsuits happening, and now he's learned that the Pittsburgh Police Motorcycle Unit has been disbanded, and it's being investigated why that occurred. The Civilian Review Board in Pittsburgh is investigating this, and he was going
Can
through
you
some
go full screen?
transcripts.
Can you take 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and show people this? Give us another flyby. So what happened here? So the Pittsburgh crew, the four officers on the cops on the motorcycles, they escorted Trump from the airport up to Butler.
Right,
Four of them got injured. One
right.
goes to the hospital, and now they've been disbanded.
Yeah,
They
he's
broke
got
up the
this.
motorcycle pool.
Yes, he's got this Zoom call where they're talking about it, and they're talking about the investigation because nobody knows why it's been disbanded. I mean, it certainly sounds like some sort of retaliation. Let's listen to it for a second.
Was another. They were representing the Bureau of Police. Whether they were there authorized or not is still a question. What supervisor was responsible for authorizing them to go? And then escorting was one thing, staying at the event was another. So far as we know, there were disciplinary actions taken. As a result of that, the motorcycle unit was broken up. It was busted up. There's no supervisor assigned to it, as I understand it now. They assigned them
Sounds to
all
you
to the
like we're
downtown
listening to
unit
high school.
or sent them
Well,
out, dispersed them.
it's a
It
Zoom
sounds like
call
high
from
school.
it's a
No,
civilian.
what I mean is, these are adult officers. These are
They're
motorcycle
just
cops.
civilians. Oh, yeah, the people they're talking about. Right, yes.
Okay, so they're talking about, did they have permission
Right.
to escort the president from Pittsburgh Airport up to Butler? Do they have permission?
I mean, shouldn't this all be
these are-
planned out? It's the president. They're going to know where he's going.
And if you don't have motorcycle police escorting, who
weird,
we bringing in? The Razor scooter police? I mean, who's going to be in front of the cars, right? I mean, usually they've got motorcycles. And then, don't you think that if they escort him from Pittsburgh Airport, so keep in mind, he's flying the 757. They didn't land at that little Butler runway. So they land at Pittsburgh Airport, and then it's about an hour drive to
Butler. A little
Butler.
more, actually. Maybe hour 15, hour 30.
And he's got that whole advanced team with the Secret Service and the motorcades and all that stuff. That's not flying in, so that has to come in advance. And that's all at the airport. So that motorcade is pretty significant. This is just 4 cops from Pittsburgh. They're going to lead the motorcade or trail the motorcade with their bikes. And the issue here is that they stayed at the event. Ding dong. At the end of the event, he's got to take the motorcade back to the airport.
Yeah.
What do you don't want them to stay? You want them to motor back to Pittsburgh and then 5 hours later ride back up to Butler? That's what they're upset about. So they disbanded the operation.
It's weird, right?
No, the weird part is that all 4 of them got hit with something. And the more they start
because they're not in on the plan, and so that there's law enforcement there, they've got to be suppressed. Huh.
If they start talking to one another, and he goes, hey, wait a second, hey, Bobby, where were you standing again? Weren't you standing you were standing 3 feet behind Tommy? Well, now they're not even in the same building anymore, right? They disband them, they break them up, they send one guy to Siberia, right? The other guy goes, they send the other guy to Milwaukee. They don't want these guys talking to each other. How did 4 guys get hit? There's only 8 shots. 2 end up in Copenhagen, or 1 hits his arm. 1 ends up in him. 2 end up in Dutch. 1 hits Corey in the head. 1 hits Trump. 1 definitely ends up in the reservoir on the hydraulic. How do 4 guys end up getting hit with stuff?
And then also, didn't Copenhagen or one of those guys said there was a lot of shrapnel? David Dutch said there was shrapnel. It's like, really? 8 shots
flying everywhere. How does a shot that hits the guy next to you create shrapnel unless it hits metal first? It has to hit metal first. Yeah, it has to hit metal first to create shrapnel. Once it hits Copenhagen and it's in the guy, he said the bullet's still in him.
It pretty much stops in the body, right? It's like mushy.
Well, for the most part, it's called the through and through wound. The one that he had on his tricep, that's not in his tricep. So that went through, past that and somewhere, I don't know. That none of the bullets, by the way, were recovered. 0. The only
Isn't that weird?
0. The only recovered anything was the kid on the roof, who they call, the shooter kid on the roof. But that's a bullet that was fired by the Secret Service, so we don't need that. I thought
they just said shell casings, did they? They had the bullet that killed him.
Bullet fragments in his shoulder and back and stuff like that. So the medical examiner, it's irrelevant because it's from the Secret Service, so we don't need that. It's like
what they're
I don't
firing.
Need bullet fragments from Hercules. That's not helping me. I need bullet fragments from the bad guys, not from Hercules. So we have none. We have no bullet fragments from the bad guys is the point here. So nothing was recovered from Corey Comparatori. Nothing was recovered from Copenhagen. It's still in him. And there's no information about anything with David Dutch and what they took out.
Because I realize you're not a doctor, but how does that work? Like, where is this bullet that they can't get it out of the guy's body?
I played doctor when I was 6.
But no bullet removals.
I was very good.
Where is the bullet that they can't get it out?
Near his colon.
Why can't they just get it out?
It's probably right next to his spine. And they hate going in right next to the spine. They hate that stuff.
Just leave it there? Seems crazy, but okay.
I've heard it before.
Didn't he say it feels like there's somebody burning a cigarette into his leg? It sounds like that's the bullet. Take it out.
Well, it's like the sciatic nerve comes up the back of the leg, and then wherever it
So they
connects
do
to
the
spinal.
surgery and it might give him more problems, they're saying.
Oh, yeah. Or, it would be horrible. I don't know. Maybe he'll come on the show. I think they're starting to do some interviews now that they did the
The
NBC
lawyers
interview. All right.
don't like it.
All right. Well, let's talk about this real quick before we get to the voting, because this is a big deal. A lot of people talking about this. Is this DoD Directive 5240.01, and it's already being debunked.
What do you mean?
In other words, it's already posts saying that this doesn't say this and this doesn't say that. This
But doesn't say it right there.
doesn't say this and it doesn't say that, right? So it's very interesting. So if you just go to the next slide, the levels of authority, and this is this
Why is
document.
it section 3.3?
I don't know. Just why not, right?
Yeah.
When in doubt, that's the best place to put it, if you want to get the right attention. So we go down to the Secretary of Defense approval. And if we go down to Secretary of Defense approval, most people have been focusing on that section 2C, assistance in responding with assets with potential for lethality, or any situation in which it's reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious bodily injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in situations where a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. Such use of force must be in accordance with DODD 5210.56. Now, is that Posse comitatus? I don't know.
No.
Potentially is further restricted. But the part that nobody's talking about that is going to bake your cake is Section D, the provision or use of DoD unmanned systems in the United States. You mean like
Palmer Luckey likes this part.
This is why
put
Palmer
this part in
Luckey
there.
stopped tweeting. This is why somebody gave him the elbow and said, if you don't shut up, you're going to lose Section D.
I don't think they said that to him, but I think you're right. He was worried about that. Yeah. He was waiting for this to come through.
Stake. There was something huge at stake. You expose the fact that it apparently their technology was there, despite him telling it's not.
Maybe, yeah.
It appears that it was.
Seems like
the
it.
Hammer.
Looks like it. My pure opinion is it was there.
I agree. I mean, and it's not just you, right? It's you, me, Heinrich, William. I mean, a lot of people were looking at the work and saying it sure does look like an anvil. And if it's not, is it a Chinese knockoff?
Well, or do they have some other, I mean, like, how a Tesla Model Y looks different, but it looks like it's designed by the same guy who made the Model X or whatever.
Right.
And
that would allow Palmer Luckey to say, that would allow Palmer Luckey to say that's not an anvil, that's not an endural anvil. You're full of shit. And have some, there's some, credibility there. So, but I thought it was,
or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's the anvil too. It's the endural hammer. Whatever.
Right.
All right. So the notion here, everybody's talking about this lethality. Sounds a lot like Posse comitatus is getting trampled on here.
Yes, absolutely.
Reminds me of that movie with Bruce Willis. Was it Annette Bening, where Bruce Willis brings the army into New York and they round everybody up at Randall's Island?
The Siege or something like that?
Yeah. And he's like, you don't want to bring us in. We're a hammer. Everything to us looks like a nail. And, warns her about, bringing in the army. And next thing you know, they got, prisoner camps on Randall's Island and stuff. The Siege, right?
Yeah.
Interesting movie.
It's the force of the country or region is what the Posse comitatus means, sometimes shortened simply to Posse from the mid 17th century onward to describe the force itself. I mean, they brought this about after the Civil War to make it so that the government can't just take your house and use it as a barracks for, soldiers and, all kinds of stuff. But it's got lots of problems. We spoke about this. It's funny. It's interesting how this all came up at once, John. I don't think that's by accident. It was that guy Nate was in the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard, of course, is the one branch of the military that is not restricted by the Posse Comitatus Act because it also has a civilian law enforcement role. It's very weird. That makes me think they should take the Coast Guard out of the military and have the Navy do whatever the Coast Guard does and make the Coast Guard a civilian law enforcement thing.
Doesn't the Coast Guard have like a dotted line to Mayorkas or something like that?
Yes, it's controlled by the Department of Homeland Security. That's the other thing. It used to be under, I think the Treasury also. Oh, no, sorry. That's the Secret Service was under the Treasury. But you're right. The Coast Guard is also controlled by the Department of Homeland Security. All this stuff that was stood up right after 9/11 has proven now here 25 years later to be essentially 100% treasonous. And also, I was asking people this on X. Do you feel safer, John? Do you feel like it's less likely right now that there will be some massive terrorist attack than you did on September 10th, 2001? You feel safer?
Actually, it's the one thing I do believe Chris Wray. When Chris Wray says, we're kind of
any minute
trouble.
It's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the one thing. It's like, I think he's telling the truth for
right.
once.
But the point is they did all this stuff after 9/11, and here we are. The world is more dangerous. So I don't want to listen to these people who think that they're experts at whatever they think they're experts at, who need, this is like Palmer Luckey.
Very interesting you said that. I know we got to go to the patron only, but very interesting you said that. I think it was last night. The guy from Shark Tank,
Mark
Mr.
Cuban.
Wonderful.
Mr. Wonderful. Oh, yeah. Kevin O'Leary.
So he's doing an interview, and he points out that 82% of the guys in the market, the hedge fund guys, can't beat the S&P. Everybody thinks they're an expert. Right. Everybody thinks they're a genius. And if you just put your money in the S&P, you do better than 82% of these guys. Right. But they all think that they're experts. They all think they're geniuses. They all, they got their fancy place up in Stamford, Connecticut, and, and they can't beat the S&P 5 years in a row. And I thought it was a very interesting point. So to your point, this is to first principles. You have to use your own judgment. Jump ahead just to the slide in the map, and we'll jump off from that to the patron only. We're going to look at Dominion voting systems. It is the dominant player. We're going to look at their acquisitions. We're going to look at who owns the company, for real, who owns the company, and it's going to surprise you. And then we're going to look at the software and how the software works. We're going to be looking at what they call their democracy suite and how it does adjudication. And if you want to understand how to manage an election, stay tuned. Join our patron-only portion of the show. This is going to blow your mind. You're going to get to see how to manage an election.
How to mismanage an election. Stay with us, everybody.
No, that's if you use it wrong. Yeah, but you got to use it right. You got to use it right. Bill Clinton will tell you that. Right?
Yeah.
Carrie Lake's a pretty attractive woman, I hear.
He's losing his mind. He's like, hey, RFK, your mom used to drunk text me. She was pretty hot. Stay with us, everybody. If you're not already a sponsor, please become one. You can join us for the sponsor-exclusive segment starting in less than 5 minutes on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We can't make these videos without your support and sponsorship. So stay with us, become a sponsor. John's going to unravel all